be very honest, we have done a lot of testing in the last 1 year. The algorithms and the computer capacities, the skills are nowhere there to kind of replace researchers for a very long time. Saurabh, if you know this footballer by the name Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff brought in this concept called total football. Total football is where you have your core competence and then your ability to play in any position. So whether it is defending, if you're a midfielder, can you go and score a goal? Can you defend very quickly? And that kind of flexibility gives a team a lot of advantages when they are kind of competing on the playground. I came to the stunning conclusion that actually politics can do a lot of mess, but good politics is not necessarily equal to good performance. It is not. I think the favorite work that we did was not in polling, by the way. It was not. We were helping a very large party to kind of engage with the ruling party in the floor of the assembly and, to day-to-day legislative work. CrowdWisdom is a gaming website that enables people to participate or to enjoy from their own ability to predict events.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Recast. Today I have with me Subhash Chandra, who spent almost like more than 2 decades within the market research business. But if I ask this question to him, he may not completely agree with me because I don't know whether he's still in market research or he sort of pivoted from there, because I think he's invested a lot on the technology side of market research. So I'm very happy to have you on my show today, Subhash.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you for having me. It's great talking to you.
So Subhash, let's sort of dive into this. I sort of went through your profile. You sort of started your career in mid 90s, and I think you've seen this industry evolving by leaps and bounds. And I think even now, I think we say that we are in that whole transformative phase where so much is happening around us, and sort of technology is actually impacting not just our industry but industries across the board significantly. So I just want to understand, of course, I would want my audience to know more about you. But at the same time, I just want you to explain your journey, through that changed lens, that, Subhash in mid 90s versus Subhash in 2021, what is different or, what is similar?
So, sort of in a very peculiar of circumstances, I started my career in a tech research firm. I was not a tech guy, but there's a company called IDC, International Data Corp. And this is 97, 98. So these were times when the modem would make that noise when you connected to the internet, right? It was almost like there was an emotional high when the noise ended because it connected, and then there was 16 kbps downloads. And we were doing, I think at that time, there were 32,000 internet users. So, and we are a very peculiar generation because while I'm close to 50, we are also the first generation to have started day one at work with an email address and internet access, which is really unusual. You would think old people, middle-aged people did not have access to the internet, but we were the first generations where we accessed email, we had internet and so on. So it was very clear at the very outset that this was going to be a big thing. And we were, for good or bad, we went through the 99-2000 period, which was the whole dot-com boom and bust and so on and so forth. I had taken a job for a short period with dot-com and got laid off in a few months. So I went through the journey then. But it was very clear right from where we started that this internet and everything was going to be dramatically very important. But the impact on our day-to-day lives and our work really didn't happen for a very long time. If you think of between 97 and all the way, I would say even until 2012, 13, that it hadn't in India at least reached that level of importance. And I would say that would apply globally as well. And I think everything transformed from probably about 2010 and 11 when smartphones reached a certain level. And I just don't mean in India, but all over the world. You can look at the smartphone stats. And I think one of the most visible evidence of how important smartphones were is to look at all the political movements that have started after 2010, completely empowered or whatever you call it, negatively or positively, voters around the world starting from Tunisia. So that is when I think the industry started to evolve very, very differently, very, very quickly. And if you actually look at the industry numbers since then, it is completely transformed. So if you look at Kantar, and I remember I had written probably one of the first blogs on research way in 1999. Okay, this was on GeoCities. It was a top visited page for a very long time. And at that time, the top research companies were, of course, Nielsen, there was IMS, there was some version of Kantar, and so on. And the interesting part was that that is completely transformed today. I mean, in 20, 22, 23 years, when you look at market cap as an example, not revenues, you will find that the number one player is a company called Qualtrics, which is valued at 27 billion. SurveyMonkey is somewhere in between 6 and 10 billion, and then you have Nielsen and Kantar and Ipsos and so on. So I think the real transformation happened after 2011, 12, I would think, when smartphones took off, because that's when the tech-based players kind of came into play. But the fact was that throughout this period, now at the initial stages, it was all about, do I have a computer with me or not? Do I have a laptop with me or not? Do I have internet connection at home? That transformation was anyway happening, but the transformation was happening at an individual level, maybe a little bit at the industry level, but I think it's only after smartphones that it's completely changed. So it has been an interesting journey, and I was fortunate to have got all the right opportunities. Very, very fortunate, I think, in many, many ways. I think today, whatever has been accomplished, it's been accomplished because I'm in the industry. I have no hesitation at all in saying that. And I have the last 7 years been kind of outside the mainstream agencies. I've not worked in an agency of sorts. I've been running it on my own with people from other industry, whether it's financial services, whether it is telecom and people like that. And I think that I felt very comfortable engaging with them in saying that a good researcher can engage with anybody. And I'm not taking pride in this. I'm saying, let's say I'm an average researcher. But our ability to engage and ability to deliver and very commonsensical, logical answers is, I think, a blessing. That's how I see it. So it's been so far a fantastic journey. I've got all the opportunities, whether it is Nielsen, Kantar, even smaller agencies like Market Probe that I've worked with. They've given me, I think, incredible opportunities. And I traveled abroad, worked abroad, and fantastic leaders, etc. Yes, there are a lot of negatives, and we'll talk about it at some point. But I think where I am here, I have to say that first. That's because I'm a researcher, and I'm very, very proud of calling myself a researcher. It is the DNA. That's the core. And when I get calls, and 2 days back I received a call from a very senior, civil servant, and he was very clear. He said, Subhash is a very good researcher, and I felt good because that's who I am. We can be doing 100 other things, but that's the core. So yeah, superb journey. Tech has been central, great opportunities to learn and grow. So yeah, and I'm not a traditional researcher, by the way. And why I'm not a traditional researcher is there is an unusual part of my entire research career is I have spent not more than 2% of my time doing CPG research, which is central to research. And in fact, if you didn't do CPG research, you're not a researcher. I mean, that's something that people tell us. But I haven't. Maybe I handle a couple of large accounts, but by and large, I mean, outside that space, I've built my strength there and kept it there, and we made a huge differences to businesses over the last 15, 20 years.
That's fascinating. In fact, I think I would want to go back to the point that you just made, that how the market cap of organizations like Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey is significantly higher than some of the existing players in the industry around which this industry used to revolve in early or sort of late 90s. Uh, I was speaking about this with another gentleman, and I think he had a very interesting viewpoint on this, and he said that the core of our work is to help businesses reach a decision so that they can actually bring about positive impact. That's where I think data and evidence helps, right? And hence I think the focus that we typically have, and the focus that we are also trained on, is delivering the right message. However, now because data is everywhere, you also need platforms, that can carry that data and, sort of make that, actually sort of make that very data more democratic, right? So why is, or like, why are markets, focusing on platform more than the message?
Uh, I think there are different perspectives. Don't forget that SurveyMonkey has been there for 20 odd years, 23 years, I think. They've been there from a very long time. So I'll just keep SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics at different places. Qualtrics has come in because and has been successful because I think over the last 20, 30 years, the customer experience industry has evolved a lot. I mean, I've worked with them. I have a book, by the way, written in that area. And 15 years ago, when I would run any CX project, we would find a lot of deficiencies in service delivery. I'm not saying we don't today, but the scale of the deficiencies have come down because of technology, because of learning curve, or whatever you call it. So the researcher involvement and inciting and value has fallen quite a bit. And I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, we would run a whole day workshop for any top brand in trying to make a difference to their business. So let's say a brand is not delivering well on some element of service. We'd spend a whole day setting up a workshop, going through reams of data and coming up with action plans. They would then spend a month fixing it. Then we go back to customers, and that was a cycle. In 2006, we built an elaborate six-way or five-way system to monitor how retail outlets were doing. So that's the level of engagement I'm talking about 15 years back. Now, those brands today are delivering, if I just take a number, an 85% to 90% satisfaction levels. That's the level they're delivering. They're doing very well as businesses. So when you go and tell them, I'm going to help you, improve your service further, the scope is much lesser. And therefore, the willingness to pay a premium comes down. And look at Qualtrics. Qualtrics didn't take off in 2006. They didn't take off in 2010. I don't think they launched, but that's not when they had the scope. The scope happened in 2012, 13, 14, 15, when everything started getting better, technology got better, the customer experience levels improved. Then a Qualtrics came in nicely fitted in with a platform, because then you didn't need a researcher. In fact, I remember when these platforms started taking off in 13. Initially, some companies were very uncomfortable, and I would get a call and say, okay, we'll go to Qualtrics, one of these big players, and why don't you come and help us in, kind of doing the consulting bit. But now that's changed. You don't need it maybe once in a while, because by and large, the solutions are thought through. The kind of issues you face has minimized quite a bit, unless you're a very, very new business. There's humongous amount of learning residing in people itself. So that is why I think Qualtrics has kind of taken off, and Qualtrics and, players like that. SurveyMonkey, I think, is not a platform in that sense at all, because I think they're far away from being integrated into the organization. SurveyMonkey is in a completely different space. They're in the space to really empower anybody to carry out research on their own. I think Qualtrics is trying to play the game as well. But anyway, SurveyMonkey I think is a little different, and they have been in this for a very long time, and I think they have kind of been through the journey that we have been through as well, and they've been struggling because of value, insights. How do I be a kind of a DIY, original DIY platform, and still try to add value? And that's the struggle they've been going through, but they've done well. But I would put these two in two different places, and I think part of the reason why you don't see a Qualtrics overwhelming in brand tracking and segmentation and places like that is simply because you still need the consulting input, and they're not a consulting player. So the less the consulting input, the more the level of automation. So that's the thing. So if you look at qual research as an example, the moderation bit and the data summarization bit is being done by algorithms now. There is no need. I mean, maybe a qual researcher can be asked the questions, but I don't know how long that will be there. But definitely from consulting angle and adding value, preparing a presentation, adding dimensions of insights, that will still come from human intervention. But the data collection component, and there are so many players who have, I think, in my estimate, raised $500 million in the last 3 or 4 years, are all there across the market, doing at least getting the data out and then saying, okay, now you want someone to go through it, fine. If you don't want anybody to go through it, we'll kind of summarize it, bring sentiments out and things like that. So we have to look at this platform game from how the industry overall is evolving. Brand tracking and places like that will take time, because you still need a lot of thinking, researcher thinking there. And brands today are still struggling. I know there are many brands with 20% awareness and 1% font, particularly newer players in the market. So that struggle will remain. So that's how I see it. And I think technology, etc., are just kind of making things faster in sense of people attempting to kind of automate many of these processes, and they will, as we will, as many other players will. But can we replace many of these kind of research studies, replace the human with these machines? To be very honest, we have done a lot of testing in the last 1 year. The algorithms and the computer capacities, the skills are nowhere there to kind of replace researchers for a very long time.
Right. I mean, that's a very interesting thought, and I think one element where I'll also seek your opinion is the whole debate of simplicity versus complexity. I think one thing that I've seen what these platforms tend to do much better is, they actually really make things simple for the end user, somebody who has got nothing to do with data, nothing to do with research, but, they can still carry out their tasks, by just logging onto those platforms. And, these are what we call as the do it yourself, sort of platforms. However, I think, a lot of researchers that I speak to, I think they take a lot of pride in saying that, I can really, take a problem and through a very complex route, you can call it advanced analytics, you can call it regressions, you can call it a segmentation technique, you can call it a structure hierarchical modeling. People take a lot of pride in going through that complex journey, to sort of decode answers, for actually their client partners. So how do you look at this whole equation of simplicity versus complexity? Do you think that, because now research is quite widespread, the use of evidence is quite widespread within the organizations, the end businesses are really looking for simpler solutions rather than investing their time with researchers who sort of, tend to really take them through a very complex route and a complex journey?
Okay. So there are two parts to it. One is the researcher's part and one is the client perspective. From a researcher's perspective, I don't know, Saurabh, if you know this footballer by the name Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff brought in this concept called total football. Total football is where you have your core competence and then your ability to play in any position. So whether it is defending, if you're a midfielder, can you go and score a goal? Can you defend very quickly? And that kind of flexibility gives a team a lot of advantages when they are kind of competing on the playground. And I think today's researchers should move away. In my view, that is a very traditional way of thinking, saying, I'll run 5 hierarchical models. And I did a lot of structural equation modeling in my life. I love doing it even today. But I've also learned a few things in the last 7 years, which I think many mainstream researchers are not recognizing. And I learned this, unfortunately, in a very peculiar circumstance. I'll give you an example. So we have a lot of people coming to my website, and we are a publishing website. We publish research data, gaming data, things like that. Publish a lot of data, which is what we call B2C research. Okay, let's call it B2C research. And they come there, they collect their data. Maybe a few of them register on our website, and they play a few games and go away. And we have some idea of their demographics, and we have a huge database of them. And we also, when we carry out research for our clients, also reach out to panel partners, whoever they are. We'll just call them panel partners, sometimes even on-ground, field agencies as well. And this can apply to any country. And I'm just giving you this as an example. So what tends to happen is that once the data comes in, and today the way data collection happens is the researcher gets to see the data live. I mean, those days are gone. They can actually see respondent to respondent as it happens. So when our team looks at this data in great detail, they've come to one very, very interesting conclusion. Response rates when we send out surveys to our own platform members are very, very low, as low as 0.3%, maybe 0.1%. Okay, let's say we get 150 responses. We reject maybe 5. Any other system we use, we end up rejecting 15 to 20%. Okay, so now the reason I'm saying this to you is that when I'm doing complex hierarchical analysis, and I'm not running a publishing platform like I do, if somebody is not doing it, you're basically collecting data from a place where a lot of the data is coming from people who are constantly giving out surveys, and you're going to build strategy on that basis. So my thing is that we have to have some humility in saying that complex analysis is required when it is required, and it cannot be the only thing that defines us as people. As people, we are here to help our clients answer and solve certain problems. And we have to do it in whatever it takes in an ethically right way, and also do it in a manner that makes a difference to their business. That's the reason I say your approach should be total football, which means that if I feel qualitative research can solve this problem, then I should go and do it. And I'll give you an example of a recent case study. The client wanted a large quant, and my colleague, she turned and said, no, you don't need a quant. And we both are quant researchers. So, very, very excited looking at quant work. And she said, no, you just need a simple qual and this will do the job. And after that, we could think of doing a quant if it's required. My point is that, we should not, as researchers, ethically be stuck to what we are good at, but rather help the client, kind of move forward. And yeah, if I can't do something, I go to someone who can do it, rather than, trying to push through a solution. That is my thing. I'm not criticizing somebody who's very good at it. It's very, very good. It's admirable, when I see some people do some phenomenal segmentation work. It's very, very admirable. One enjoys the journey, and if you've done it as well, you know how exciting it is. complex demand forecasting. All of us enjoy it. I mean, we like, it is the nights when you feel really good. You feel alive, let's use the word, as researchers. But I think we have to be practical, and that's the client perspective. The client perspective is it needs to get done. They need answers, and they need answers to kind of, take decisions. At the end of the day, the client's choice is very similar. Do I rely on my gut? Do I rely on a few things that are coming from inside the organization, or should I go and rely on data? Now, you may come and say, look, I have this complex process. I have a simple process. The client only wants to know what can I trust and what can I rely. As researchers, quant, qual, whatever combination these days we have, analytics, we just have to give them what we believe is a rightly and fully thought through answer, irrespective of what the methodology and framework is. This is at least my philosophy. It was not the case 7 years ago. 7 years ago, before I left the agencies, there was a lot of this about quant could do things really well. Qual is there to just give us an overview and maybe some bit of depth, and then essentially we'll use them to run our surveys. And I've been in that boat as well. And then this whole sense of how many data sets you're combining to do a narrative, and we feel very good about it. But 7 years, I think, after having been on my own and then meeting so many different people, I feel that that's a very fragile approach. In fact, I think people who researchers who adapt as many of these other practices and ways of doing things will actually end up being winners, much bigger winners than they are today, because the clients will start looking at them at a very different level. You will no more be seen as the guy who's doing some quant research and doing some algorithms for the back end, but rather as a partner that can make a difference to the business. This is my experience, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs to reach this stage. It was not a view I held maybe 7-8 years back. 7-8 years you felt like what you said, the predominant view was methodology, framework, high level modeling, and all of that. But I feel that's not the only thing about a market researcher.
I think one key takeaway, at least for the audience, at least who belong, to the industry, would be that I think now is the time to again reinvent, expand your skill set, sort of try newer things. I mean, if you've not done a course in AI or ML, and if you don't know what those really mean and how you can really implement them, I mean, I think now is the time to sort of go and sort of get trained. I think in all of those, it'll just widen your perspective and horizons. But I think let's move forward, and I think you've mentioned this a couple of times now. I think in our discussion that 7 years back something happened, where you left an agency and you started, or you ventured out on your own, right? Just take us back to that day when you made that shift. What really led, to you leaving the agency, and then what plans you had, and what did you do after that point?
So this is it is into the domain of gossip now, but I'll share with you the gossip as well.
Sure. We all love gossips.
Yeah,
You,
it's a gossip.
you
So
just may
this
give us
was
a headline, for this show.
so this was 2013. I left in 2014. This was 2013, and I had this 4-hour session with someone very senior, and I remember I spent like 4 hours, 4 hours, and it was like you should do this, you should do that, and it was a lot of what you should do, etc. And I kept thinking at that meeting, I said, but I do all of this. We already do all of this. And this person is really senior, and he was telling me what I should do. But I said, I'm already doing all of this. Now, what else? What am I going to do? And I was very anxious after that, saying, if he's telling me that I should be doing this, and he's really senior, and someday I would like to be in that position, so I'm going to keep doing this for the rest of my career. I got scared. I went home and I was absolutely shocked, because I was thinking that we were doing something much more than what I was doing then. And then it kind of opened my mind to many other things. I kept my mind open, and luckily for me, my organization was very kind to get me a coach, very evolved and very expert coach who spent a lot of time in trying to shape and reshape. And I felt at that time, and I was doing very well. In fact, I would think that would have been the prime of my career. So there is a mix of what I was seeing, the mix of some hidden aspirations that were already there. And then there was this whole coaching, which was kind of taking me into a direction where I felt more could be accomplished. So I think that would have been the longest notice period anybody would have given. So I quit in I think January or February. So and my notice period was until August or something like that, which is by choice, by the way, so that I could do the transitions. I would have left in 2 months or something, I guess, but I took a long notice period. So it was also gave me enough time to think about what I want to do much more clearly. But I was very clear that the area that I wanted to give some time was politics. And I said I wanted to do this because that's an area of interest for me for the last, I don't know, since I was 8 or 9. And while my mom wanted me to do the civils, etc., that was not something that attracted me. Politics did, and I was quite actively involved in politics in college and much later as well. And always had some desires. And so let me experience this firsthand. And the only way, and the great thing is for a researcher, politics is not far off. I mean, it is you know polling and polls and all. So yeah, that's the journey that I started. But it was a combination of aspirations, but some frustration as well. And they say don't take decisions on the basis of frustration, but I was quite disappointed. And trust me, that was the best decision I ever took, because irrespective of what happened after that, the ups and downs that came in your career after that, I think it was a very wise decision, because it opened up my mind. I'm much more skilled now than I was 7 years ago. I know from my colleagues, my business partners now, etc., that there is a learning curve that comes in when you are on your own and you're kind of building something on your own. It's a completely different learning curve. But also, I think one of the biggest learnings through this journey was, it teaches you some level of humility, which when you're really doing well, you kind of tend to lose. So, but yeah, that was the trigger, a combination of 2 or 3 things: aspiration, some degree of frustration with knowing what the future kind of was looking like, and a bit of, I think, nudging by a coach who I think kind of made me look at myself. And I think this whole journey in the 7 years is not just a journey in terms of what you learned and skills, etc., but also as a person. You're completely a different person than you were 7 years. And I'll tell you, I am happy to share this in public. So when a lot of people met me many years later, so the first thing is they talk to you for some time and they tell you that I thought you were very arrogant. And it was a shock, because it's somebody showing a mirror and said, when you were working with us, we thought you were arrogant. They were not interacted with me, but that was the image.
That was the image that they carried in their heads.
Yeah. And whether it was right or wrong is not the debate. But it was not nice at all to know that is how you came across to other people. So yeah, some bit of course correction about openness, accessibility. Also in terms of what you want in life, that also changes from 7 years ago to, money, power and pride and whatnot, to now about, hey, let me do the next thing brilliantly well. And of course, I'm not saying that I don't understand business, that I don't understand finance, or I don't understand, fundraising and valuation. I do understand, and I think it's very important, but I don't get obsessed by it as I would have 4 5 years ago. My point is, you build the right product, build the right services, deliver, and everything else will be fine. But yeah, it's been a very important journey from an individual as well. It's a very, very different person compared to 7 years ago.
That's fascinating, because I think also the field that you chose, I think, is also, the road that is traveled by very, very few people. I mean, election polling business in India. I mean, you sort of go and speak about it, to the bigger corporations, they would distance themselves away, and they'll say that, that's not our cup of tea, because, the way business is done, the way election polling is done, though I think, it has also come a long way, with sort of leaders now having, or with actually political leaders now having a more modern outlook, and they've all understood the importance of evidence and research and trends. So how was that journey? I mean, you wanted to do something in election polling. Election polling in India typically tends to be more seasonal, with the local, state, and then federal elections, sort of going in cycles. Though I mean, it's a huge country, so but again, I think from what I've heard, the entry point into that space is also very difficult. I mean, it's not a structured path that you go, you apply for a bid, you get that job. So how did you start in that space? And then I know that you came up with a new platform, which you will
Yeah.
definitely share. But just
Yeah,
help
yeah.
us, on that aspect.
So the election polling bit is, there are 2 parts. Maybe now I would say there are 3 parts. The first part is the thing that you run for media firms, which I think the Nielsen's and the Ipsos's are, and there are a lot of players in that space. Then there is a second one, which is for politicians. There's pure play politicians, private work, usually at the party headquarters level, or even at an MLA, MP level. So that's the second. And the third one, which I think we have been, and a lot of other players have started getting in, is the consumer side, where you get the consumers themselves to fund or be a part of a kind of a prediction exercise or a polling exercise, because the consumer engagement is huge now, and that's also a space where you can monetize. But coming back to this journey, I didn't have a great experience with the media partnerships and all it. We did a few here and there. I didn't enjoy them because for them the entire thing was a headline, and so it was okay. I think that's something they needed and they wanted to do it, and it was fine. But we were not adding value there, and that is some. So I did that for about a year or so, and then I said no, I want to get into hardcore stuff. And fortunately, we got quite a few breaks with quite a few political leaders, a couple of them who were chief ministers as well. And so we had a very kind of useful and learning journey over the last, between 2000, I would say, I think 15, all the way to 2019. So 4 years of it, hardcore, where we had a big team. So I was obviously doing research, but there were others in the team as well doing different things. So somebody was doing what you call digital marketing, somebody was doing television. There were a couple of other segments that I don't want to talk about, but yeah, there were a lot of things that were happening, and yeah, it is a fascinating business because the political engagement is very complex, and we have the same problem that we have on the client side. The politician, whether he's a party president or a candidate, okay, either guy, all of them have reached that level without too much of research. So the mindset and thinking is I can probably do without it, and they always have a trusted associate or bunch of associates, some old professor or some guy who's helped him win the last election, and things like that. So you're always interacting with politicians with that on your head. And then there are politicians who think, yeah, they got to do it, and then they will have you to do it. They have another person to do the same thing and a third person to do the same thing with minor variations here and there. But a lot of really good work. I think the favorite work that we did was not in polling, by the way. It was not. We were helping a very large party to kind of engage with the ruling party in the floor of the assembly and, to day-to-day legislative work. So we did a lot of legislative work, and it was fun because when you identify pressure points on the government tends to, find a compromise, and it actually benefits people. It really benefits people. And so that was, I think, the highlight of the entire thing. But otherwise, politics is a very complex business. What I think most people, let me just pull back there, but I think that there is a very certain naivety on how people think politics is done. Definitely in India, I can say, and I'm sure it applies to all the other countries, which is the level of non-political factors that come into play in election, which are invisible, is very high. It is, and people don't want to see it, don't want to hear from it. We've seen it in, I think, in 19, very closely, where the election was being decided by a bunch of people unrelated to the voters, and the kind of things they were doing was actually intervening in the election process, and they were doing it, and people were pretty okay with it as well. So I think that kind of naivety is the problem, and therefore, yes, purely from a democracy angle, I think we are a very early stage democracy, let me call it. We are at least 50 years from being slightly mature. Not to say corruption doesn't exist everywhere. So all over the world, there is corruption, somewhere higher, somewhere lower, and so on. But it's not just about corruption. It's also about vision. It is about how do you want to implement the vision? How do you accommodate? See, the thing about politics is you want to take everybody along, not because you don't want opposition, because it is the most optimal thing to do. How do you take at least most people along in a journey that takes the country, the state, the district, even the cooperative society to a level that would have been most optimal? And that is the journey. I think as researchers, that is our job, to go back and tell that. But what we end up doing instead is finding out what is most optimal for 51% of the vote, and that, I think, was a big turnoff. That the idea of polling outside an election is not 51% of the vote, but it is about how do you move the needle to take most people along, and an optimal path, which is good overall for the country or for the state or the city, as the case may be. So a lot of such things. The low point, I think, however, was this, that we were doing exactly the same thing that I mentioned, which is doing a lot of background research, and we stumbled onto something that looked like corruption. And And then we ended up in a situation where the ruling party and the opposition happily had a deal, backroom deal, and then there was the corruption scandal just disappeared from the pages. And so these things happen a lot. And so, yeah, at some point in time, I felt that, and I think while I was running through those 4-5 years, I was running through a lot of data, and I came to the stunning conclusion that actually but politics can do a lot of mess, but good politics is not necessarily equal to good performance. It is not. In fact, there's a lot of other factors. So politicians can really muck up things, but can politicians transform a country dramatically, or a state or a city? I think rarely. They can, but rare. There are pivotal situations like George Washington and so on and so forth. Very pivotal, what you call,
Personalities.
yeah, Winston Churchill kind of, pivotal times. Yes, in those times, those matter a lot. But otherwise, I
Because
think the
see, I
data
think I
that,
think even they are part of a bigger machinery. They're part of a bigger system, right?
yes,
And I think they
yes,
they're also a cog in the wheel if you just look at
yes.
them with a perspective. Of course, their personalities, they are all over the news, so we probably in our minds hype them up, but they are still part of a machine, right?
Yeah,
So
because people
so
forget. No, people forget. I think for England as an example, or everybody thinks about how England fought bravely during World War II, but they don't. They forget that that was the world superpower at that time, and 9 million British were ruling half the planet. And for me, the most iconic imagery about the Brits was that they took a boat out of London or Southampton or a place like that. Really chilly winter, rainy winter, really depressing weather. Took the boat, went all around to Africa, then took the whole turn around the Cape of Good Hope, and then came in. A bunch of a society that is willing to endure so much pain. It has much more than a Winston Churchill alone that must be driving that society. And I think and that's the thing that at least I learned in my 2 years in the UK about how important as a national culture, persistence, independence, pace, those things matter a lot. And I think those things are a much better determinant of a society's success than whether the prime minister or the chief minister is good or bad. If the society is sufficiently independent, open-minded, willing to put in the hard work, is very persistent, then you will tend to see them do really well. And that applies to any society. And that is one of the things. So that is when I realized that, okay, I've done enough of this. Let me pivot a little bit. And so CrowdWisdom came in from there because I saw a lot of consumer interest. And I felt that it was our responsibility to tell voters in a very unusual way where things are, and give them a kind of a window to things that they would not know. And so that was the journey. That is how I pivoted away from working with politicians. And once I started giving information to consumers, I stopped working with politicians. You
okay.
couldn't do both. It was going to be conflict of interest. So that
Right.
stopped immediately after.
You are stuck in an elevator. There's an investor who you can actually pitch Crowd Wisdom to. In 30 seconds, explain it to our audience what that platform is and what it really does.
CrowdWisdom is a gaming website that enables people to participate or to uh, enjoy from their own ability to predict events. It's a very simple way. That's what it is. Come there, play, and go. That's the core of the proposition. Yeah, and it's a gaming platform, but it is designed for people interested in politics or sports to predict and go. And we were one of the earliest prediction platforms in the country. Now, of course, there are many, but yeah, that was it. Politics, I think we're still
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest. Yeah.
So if as a user I log into your platform, I mean, how do I get engaged? What are the engagement principles? I understand that these are games, but these are games designed around surveys and taking my opinion, or there's much more to that
Yeah,
platform.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So we've evolved that over time, right? And now we have kind of settled to it's actually a trading platform. So you actually trade. It's like a stock trade, and you can buy and sell, whatever is the prediction. So, for example, a prediction, as an example, would be that the particular ruling party will win 100 seats in this election, and we have certain odds put behind it, and say the odds or the chance of this happening is 75%. So it will be available at certain price. And then we let the buyers and sellers determine what is the right price. So as we reach the fag end of the election, you will get to see what we hope is the right kind of price. And there is money involved as well, but there are certain rules and laws in India. So you can't put money behind your prediction, but you can put money to participate in a game. And then there's a separate payout system that we built in. But it is a very simple proposition. The more there is a demand for a certain prediction, the price goes up. So, for example, I remember in 2019, the prediction that BJP will win 350 plus seats. Finally, the last trade was at 69 out of 100. So, just before the results were out, it was 69 or 100, which says it's a not high probability, but medium to high probability event. A high probability event is a 95 and so on. Most intriguing one was recent, where Mamata Banerjee was contesting with in Bengal, and what we found there was that it was a 51-49, and that was the result, by the way. That was the final result. I think she lost by a few hundred votes. And I'm bringing India examples here, but we did a lot of elections. We did Brazil, we did Pakistan, we did the US, we did UK, we did Israel. We are now just about to launch Germany. We did a very elaborate exercise in Sri Lanka. But we use this gaming platform throughout because that is the best way, because at the moment people have paid a subscription fee, a small subscription fee, a token in fact, and then are beginning to play the game. They're very careful about the trades they make. They just don't buy every trade. And they are, of course, a bit risk averse, but we give them very few, because we give a game currency that they can use. They don't use the real money. So we give them a game currency, but we give them a very limited number of it. So now to decide whether I'm going to go behind A or B or C. And so it's designed like it's a survey, but it's designed in a gaming format, so people can kind of do it quickly and come back. And we let them trade as well. So if they want to change their mind 5 days down the line, they come and change their position. And it depends. If the price is very high from where they bought, great. You make you add. So your idea is to optimize your points. The more the points you optimize, the higher the reward that you will earn. So you should be the highest. So yeah, it's a very simple game. But you got to be passionate about it to come and play the game. And yeah, people do come. A lot of hundreds sometimes. Yeah.
What's your average visitorship like? I mean, how many people around the world, have taken the subscription or, visited your platform and, played the game? Because I think this is actually based on a stock market principle, the demand supply. And I think that's a very refreshing take, of making, research data available, to people, by the people, for the people, and of the people, right? I mean, as we call it. So help us understand that, because I think that will just probably intrigue more to join.
No, I think two parts. One is I don't want to throw our subscription numbers out in the public domain for really legitimate reasons. One is we're in a funding. We're right now in a funding state, and we have actually a rival right now who's just launched. So I'll be doing them a big favor, and they've got funded more than we have. So yeah. But in terms of the kind of traffic over the last 2-3 years, we've had millions visiting our platform, both in India, from India and the US. These have been our top 2 countries. In the US presidential elections, I think we used to have 50,000 people a day coming in from the US alone. So we've had fairly large numbers of people. And even now, I think in an election month, it would easily cross more than 1 million visits across our platform. So it's a fairly large number. But in terms of the game participation, it's a little bit of a tricky thing. So when you ask people to predict an election, right, they will all have a number, particularly if you go to any of these communities which are focused towards politics and ask them who's going to win how much, and they'll give you a number. But the moment you ask them to pay a subscription, then ask them to predict, start to become a lot more cautious. So the conversion from the millions to then, the numbers tends to be a little uneven. It is not a traditional survey where people have to click a couple of buttons. They have to think through and say, is this price at 40 the right price? Is it at 80? And we've done a lot of codes there to tell them what a 40 is or what a 80 is. So it also appears in different colors. So for example, a prediction that has a low chance of happening actually is, you see a red button there or something like that. So it tells you, if you're going to buy this, be careful, because this seems to be, the market is pricing it at a very low level. Similarly, if somebody's trying to sell off a particular prediction and it's in green, indicates the market thinks this event will happen, and when an event happens, you get a very high payout. So the understanding of the game and the fact that you have to pay, and the chances of you losing the money, whatever, small sums of money. I mean, it's like less than $1 in most cases. So it's not a very large sum of money. But when money is in, then everybody kind of starts to think twice. But we've had a very large amount of people, many of them coming back again and again, election after election. And they take their own time, spend the time to come and do it. So large number of people who come to see the numbers. Conversion tends to be a little lower side when it comes to actually playing the game.
If anybody is interested in this platform, how can they access this? Is it only a browser based? Do you have an app? Can you just give some more details?
Yeah, so we are on Android. We are on Android, and the Android is an APK. We can't post that Android on Google because there's money involved, and Google doesn't let you. So there is an APK on our website. Otherwise, you go to CrowdWisdom360.com, and you can pick up the games that you want to play. We also have a lot of surrounding stuff as well. We have blogs and we have quizzes, which all go around the topics that we cover. So one thing is that I must be very clear that while we started off in politics, today, I think 70% of our traffic comes for non-political work, which includes financial services, which is stock market and equity market. We have a very large coverage of the US markets now, which is Bitcoin and things like that. And so equity markets as well. And then there's entertainment, particularly Big Brother and Big Boss. All of them, we turn them into prediction events. Movies are down for the last 2 years, unfortunately. Others, that would have been a big area for us. And so, yeah, these 3, 4 areas, Netflix, stuff like that. So we have politics, and then of course sports is the second biggest market. A lot of sports related predictions that we have. For example, we'll have the Premier League next month. So we'll start off a set of games around the Premier League. So yeah, it's very simple. Come there and see what event that you're interested in, and then start playing the event. That's it.
And the experience is standard across browser or mobile phone? I mean, is it device agnostic?
Yeah, it is device agnostic. It's probably more easier on the mobile phone because you can swipe the predictions. You don't have to, so you can swipe one way or the other. So it's simpler on the mobile. On the desktop, you can't do that. But the desktop is obviously a huge screen, so it kind of tends to, you can see the blogs on the side. You can, before you predict, you can do a Google search, look at the opinion polls. All of that will be there in the content. We enable them by giving them all the information. We also do a lot of other analysis. For example, we do Google Trends analysis, trying to use historical Google Trends data to predict elections as well. We've done that for the last, I think, 4 years. It's an idea we borrowed from someone, but we've used it quite extensively. So we empower them to get the prediction right. Our idea is for them to get the prediction right, not for them to get the prediction wrong. And this is something that we keep telling participants sometimes because they're worried about losing money. But we're saying we're there to help you to get it right. What information are you looking for? But it's not a perfect science. I mean, even we have gone wrong sometimes, much more than we would normally would have gone wrong. And yeah, then you get a lot of brickbats, from people because people are worried about whether my party has won or lost. Whereas we are worried about whether the prediction is true or not true as researchers. But yeah, that's an emotion that I think very few people understand. But that's okay.
So, Subhash, this is a very interesting venture. What are the plans to scale up, and are there any plans to diversify, this particular business, or are you on to another thing along with this?
So yeah, we have kind of hived off the B2B side. We were doing a lot of enterprise work using all the capabilities that we have. So that enterprise work is of course now out of CrowdWisdom, and we've started Sprint Studio, which kind of takes some of the learnings, not all, some of the learnings from CrowdWisdom, and we'll roll that out. And I think when we roll it out, people will understand which part of it has kind of been picked up from CrowdWisdom. But I think that that business is going to continue in its own path. There are a couple of new partnerships we are exploring, and we are actually making headway on that. And that would, if it goes through, then we'll go international because that's the direction we are thinking of. In fact, quite a bit both, and we are increasing our traffic mix has changed quite a bit. I think we are now 40-45% international. By the way, people from your region, Philippines, for example, is a very big market. Singapore is a decent sized market. So these are two markets in your region, for example. But US is our second biggest market. We want US in the next 3-4 months, maybe end of the year, to be our biggest market. US has a lot of diversity, but the main reason also is that the revenue realization is much better. A much better revenue realization. So that is another reason. But we continue to be big in India. We're now on most of the opinion polls. You will see us on the first page of Google. So that's going to be there. But yeah, it is going to be more expansion, more international expansion. The gaming, we are looking at 1 or 2 partnerships that will close in the next few weeks, and then we'll head in a certain direction there. But it will be out of the corporate research part completely. I mean, we're just in the final stages. We're still executing some projects, but we just kind of, there are some places where CrowdWisdom is registered as a partner or a vendor, all the documentation. So that's being kind of, that part is still there. But otherwise, we are transitioning to this new entity, Sprint Studio, which will then be only a B2B or other corporate research wing, and CrowdWisdom will be pure play B2C platform.
Right. But the fundamentals, governing both the platforms will be the same, or will there be any difference between Sprint AI or, sort of Crowd Wisdom? Or
Now
I
you're
mean, will
asking
it
me,
will it will it
you're asking,
will it
you're
still
asking.
be a like a gaming based engagement platform, or there are more services that you're also trying to add through Sprint AI, both in sort of research and technology field?
So I know you picked up one very important part, but that's not the dimension we are kind of expanding into Sprint. And Sprint has other partners as well, so they have their own vision, yeah, a vision of how we have to move forward. So you will see a bit of what we learned at Crowd Wisdom there, and it will be visible as very important elements of that bit. But uh, okay, so I'm just trying to choose my words carefully here,
Sure,
but
sure. Yeah.
yeah. So Sprint is about speed, very clearly, and Crowd Wisdom was about speed, always about speed. Something that I didn't speak earlier, but all our client engagements in Crowd Wisdom is all about how do we do whether it's election surveys for our partners who in turn were working for political parties. It was always about 2 days, 3 days, one day, and so on. And it's very important in their kind of space because they can respond with. And I think we were one of the first ones when we turned around a project. I think in 3 days, very large study, which obviously used our gaming principles that we had developed. And that we said that Rajnikant is not, it's not going to work out. It's a very bad idea. But I think we released the results on a weekend, and then I think Monday or Tuesday he had announced saying I'm not doing this. So speed was a very important part. The second part was cost, and one of our core promise was to cut down the cost by 1/10, and we did that. So these were two core promises. But where we really struggled on Crowd Wisdom, and we still continue to struggle, is on the accuracy bit. We were obviously delivering better accuracy than most other firms, but it was a little inconsistent. Our last election 4 months back was not very good at all. It was a bad experience, but we've had some very good elections, and then so it's better than the average research firm. But I think it's still, and it's something that we are collaborating with a leading IIM who have been studying this data for a long time, and they're advising us on what can be done or cannot be done. So that's a partnership we have. But the core promise was speed and cost. And Sprint, as you can say, suggests speed. So we will be that element will be replicated. We are going to be a Sprint speed-based firm. And on cost, I don't know right now at the moment. In fact, to be very honest, whether we will replicate the cost. To be honest, we can, but will we? I'm not certain about it because I think you also remarked very early in the call whether about cost and how cost plays out and how speed plays out and how do we play that game. I think on speed, I think we are fairly kind of all of us are convinced it's the right direction. On cost, I'm not certain. Even if we can deliver low cost, we are not sure that's the direction we'll go. So those are some of the calls we'll take over the next month or so or 2 months, because we'll go to a lot of clients, talk to them, understand how these play out, and then go because at the end of the day, business decision as well. It's not just a fancy academic discussion that I can turn around 1,000 sample survey in half a day. Very good. So what? So we got to be very clear what the so what is, and is it really adding value to clients. So yeah, that's the thing. But speed, yes, the core promise of the new platform will be speed. But yeah, there are a lot of nuances there that we are playing, and yeah, we're working on it right now.
7 years back, Subhash, you pivoted, from a hardcore agency role to becoming a tech entrepreneur within research fraternity. I think, like you mentioned in the call, when you started, you weren't sure as to, what kind of surprises, you'll face, but I think it was a steep learning curve. And I think last 7 years have been very good, and you've been very fortunate that you sort of took that kind of leap. How do you look at yourself 10 years down the line? Will you again have to reinvent yourself? Will you have, sort of will you have to do, because I think now you're closer to technology, you are closer to that speed and pace at which transformation is happening. So when you sit in your living room, sipping a glass of whiskey, how do you sort of, really look at yourself, in next 10 to 20 years? What will you have to do, to be relevant, to be interesting, to be engaging? And why I
Yeah.
ask that question in a different way is we can learn, from your wisdom, and I think the crowd can learn from your wisdom. You know.
I'm not, yeah, I think I'll pull back on that part of it about what people can learn because everybody's learning curve is different. But what I visualize, what I imagine is the right place is that 10 years down the line, when we look at research and insights, etc., I believe that they should be available at the, kind of a press of a button. They should be, including the complex algorithms that we spoke about. Hopefully, by then, our ability to model many of these things, it is actually getting better even today. Many of my friends who are in analytics are modeling fairly advanced models, but how do we kind of reach that place where a lot of this will be available on a, kind of a, let's say we have to meet 1,500 respondents. Can we do that in an hour? Basically, it goes out in an hour, you press a couple of buttons, the respondents reply back, then you press a button, the output is in, the machine, Siri maybe, says, hey, you got to do these 5 things. Here are the 5 action points. Okay, so in reality, we are heading in that direction. When can we achieve it in 10 years? I don't know. But I think if we have moved in that journey quite a bit, then I think we'll be very happy, which includes library of action plans, a very strong algorithm that kind of picks out what works, what doesn't work from inside the organization, from outside the organization, and so on and so forth. So very, very elaborate environment where we would actually be sitting on our computers and pressing a few buttons and getting these perspectives. I believe we are headed in that direction. Nobody can stop it. Whether it is in 10 years or maybe 15 years is a matter of debate, but that's the place we will go. And in fact, just like, I don't know if you watched Terminator, right? There was this hand that this guy creates, and then eventually the hand becomes Terminator and keeps coming back from the past. I think the hand is there today. The hand is here. It's already here, and we can see it. And I think my business partner and very long-term friend, Shweta, she was quite surprised because she was in Kantar and then she moved out of Kantar. Now it's like 4 months. And she says there is a completely large world outside, and we can absolutely, as long-term, very, very traditional researchers, old-fashioned in some ways. I mean, in terms of how we looked at research. And if you open your mind, you can really kind of take it. So I think if you ask me what I would do and what I would encourage everyone to do is total football. Go back to Johan Cruyff. Be open, be willing to do anything. And I'll tell you one very interesting thing for quant researchers. If you're not doing qual, if you're not touching qual today, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You have to be in qual is going to be huge. Qual is needed. I'm telling you as a very traditional quant researcher, qual is needed. And as a quant researcher, you got to learn how to do qual. You got to embrace qual. And AI and ML, I don't think I want to, everybody knows that is important. The other very intriguing skill that I picked up in the last 3 or 4 years, it's a fun skill, but it's very important, is digital marketing. So I'm fairly, very, very comfortable with search engine optimization. I do optimize pages which are in the top page, in the first page, whether it's in India or the US and so on. There's a lot of fun in that. But that's an area that you got to learn. And doing digital marketing has changed my perspective of what kind of recommendations we give clients today compared to I would have done 7 years ago. Instead of it being generic, you would go down to specific actions because you did it. So you weren't telling a client why a client should choose a display campaign versus a community-oriented campaign versus an aggregated campaign versus a e-commerce campaign versus a search engine optimization campaign. Why would you choose this 5? I think for me it's a relatively easier job because I actually did it hands-on while I was running CrowdWisdom. So that again, I think that is an area that, digital is an area you absolutely, and not things like you got to spend more money on digital, or, your creatives are not doing well. I think we have always done that. We have always done that. But can you go and tell why a search is a better campaign than a display and why a community-oriented program is essentially necessary for you as a brand because of where you are on the purchase funnel at the moment or where you're underperforming at the purchase funnel? I think that part of digital marketing is something I think every researcher should pick up. For me, that is the case. But just like how we have stumbled upon many of these things, I'll leave it to fate to kind of stumble upon. I'm not a guy who will go to an online course and learn and so on. I'm not that kind of person. I'm the person who will do things. So whatever new thing comes to do, we'll do it and learn along the way. But the mind has to be very open. Otherwise, you kind of get into a rut. But again, I'm not saying that if you're not doing any of these things, you're in a bad place. Life is good either way. That's a huge learning. Whatever you're doing, if you're happy with it, it's good. Go ahead. Don't worry about it. And if anybody is telling you you're stagnating, your life is not moving, tell them to go to hell. Sorry for my choice of words, but I think that's what I've learned. I might be a person who's constantly active and trying to 100 things, but it's not right to expect everyone to do that, and it is not even right to judge them for not being like that. Just do, and this is something that I want to be very careful, particularly on LinkedIn, to tell how life has to be lived. For example, happiness is important, contentment is important, learning is important. I'm very, very hesitant in saying such motherhood statements. If you want to be sad all your life, please be. Maybe that is good for you. If you don't want to learn anything, if that's good for you, please do it. If you don't want to dress up well, don't dress up well. You want to be overdressed, overdress. You want to go and jump somewhere and do it. Do whatever you want to do. I don't think let society and anybody, including me, come and tell you what is the right way. And if you're a junior researcher today says this is all rubbish, I think you're right. So because you think it is rubbish and it's good for you, it's okay. And if you're wrong, okay, which sometimes might be the case, that is also a learning, right? You go along the way and realize, hey, I think somebody said something, I should have done it. But that's also good. You should go through disappointment to learn what happiness is, because without going through the bad days, you don't know what are good days. It's a reality.
Very quickly, so that we can just make this absolutely tangible for our audience. Digital marketing, I think, has helped you, to give better recommendations. What resources would you advise, folks who are watching this, to log into and sort of get trained on digital marketing, because there are all sorts of courses out there these days. But which
No
resources
courses
would
at
you
all,
rely
because
on?
this is my way of doing things. No courses. So all I would say is open a blog and ensure that your blog on any topic that you are interested is in the first page of Google. So to do that, you got to read up a lot of material, which you can find on the internet. But open a blog, open a Facebook page, open a Facebook community page, a group, Facebook group, a Facebook page. These three things you do, and then try to see if you can get traffic to those pages. Do it hands-on, and then you will learn a lot of things, because when you go back to a video and they tell you do this, you know what they're talking about. It doesn't become theoretical stuff. So I would think these are 2-3 things you do. Yes, upload a YouTube video. So a few of these things, I think, make a video and upload it. I think it's 4-5 practical things if you do, and then read up stuff. You will find it to be very, very useful, and anybody can learn this. Anybody.
Great. I think, Subhash, I can go on for another 30 minutes, because there's so much to discuss, and there's so much to talk about, and there's so much to learn, especially I think from your experience. But I think I had an absolutely fantastic session, and I hope that once you get through this phase and launch your new venture in sort of coming days, we can have you back again, to sort of discuss more about it. Thank you so much, for actually coming on my show, and it was an absolute pleasure, to hear your thoughts on different aspects of our industry and technology.
Thanks a lot, Saurabh, for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you, and yeah, quite a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.